is a little low.
Okay.
So if you can speak up a little bit, otherwise your slide is up and we are ready to begin.
Okay. Uh, Good evening, everyone. Good evening, my friends, and good morning to my North American colleagues. Um, I'm hoping to give you a little bit of a preview of upcoming attraction, if you will, as they say in the cinema. Uh, this microbial biopesticide manufacturing training. As background, I've spent 37 years involved with the development of biopesticides. The 1980s, working for a multinational, um, working on BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, as well as the fungi, my favorite fungi. They are my babies, Bovaria, Metarhizium, Miseria. In the 1990s, I worked for a small biotech company, and we were the first ones to register and commercialize a Bovaria bassiana in the United States for use on food crops. I was in charge of all of the development and registration phases of that project. In 2000, I switched to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and I spent 20 years there doing essentially the same thing, developing myco-insecticides, as the term is, albeit for different bosses, being the federal government. So it gives me considerable experience in with these particular microbial agents, but I do have experience with bacteria, nematodes, and viruses. Um, Next slide, please. Okay, so just to meet the players, the main fungi, you have Bovaria and Metarhizium. Some of you may very well be familiar with these particular fungi. There is another genus, Iseria, currently called Cordyceps, which has been commercialized against Homoptera. And then the distant fourth place fungus is Lecanicilium, now known as Acanthamyces, which has been commercialized certainly in Europe for the control of aphids and thrips. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. These things are very popular. So in 2006, in a survey paper, 110 active commercial products involving fungi were identified. In 2017, I and a Brazilian colleague identified about 200 via the internet. As you can see here, the preponderance of them are two fungi, what we call Bovaria bassiana and Metarhizium anisoplii. So these have been getting much greater attention, greater prominence in alternatives to chemical pesticides to manage insect pests. Next slide. Next, yeah, there we go. So what is this training going to be? So we basically have five components, beginning with, for those of you who are less experienced in this field, topics of isolation, purification, identification, and preservation of candidate fungi to be developed as myco-insecticides. The next component is screening, the selection methods to identify the best fungus for development. Of course, mass production. I mean, that's critical. Mass production to meet the sufficient needs of the particular country or the particular situation. And emphasis on quality control. Quality is extremely important. I work in Ecuador, in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Caucasus, and there, especially in Latin America, quality control often suffers. And so you have bad products, even dead fungus being put out with obviously no efficacy. So the emphasis on quality cannot be understated. Okay, and lastly, some topics about formulations. How do you prepare the fungus to make it farmer friendly, if you will? And also some suggestions for best use practices with these fungi. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so there's trying to organize this, some learning objectives. So what I hope to do is to give you some basic familiarity with, as we say here in the States, for a recreational plant, how to grow your own, okay? With effective, less sophisticated, less capital intensive methods that are suitable to your regions. Some of my experience has been with very technical, very capital intensive methods, which are possible in the United States, but maybe not so suitable for other regions, particularly where labor is much more affordable than in the United States, for example. In Ecuador, where I have a number of projects with small, medium enterprises, these less sophisticated methods are very successful, producing Bovaria, Metarhizium, and even Trichoderma, the biofungicide. As much as possible, I want to give hands-on experience in the various steps of mass production. Think of this as a cooking course, if you will. And unlike sitting in the audience watching a chef prepare the meals, I want everybody to try to participate in doing the different steps so they have some feeling for how to inoculate solid substrate, how to prepare it, how to harvest it, and so on. And through all of this, I'm hoping to give you what I call tips and tricks from my 37 years of experience, okay? Obviously, adapting the methods to your capabilities and your needs. Thus, we're going to hopefully have lots of discussion about, oh, okay, we could do this, or no, we can't really do this. What's an alternative? Okay, next slide. Okay, just to go through in a little bit of detail, the first component is isolation of fungal candidates, sources, isolation procedures, long-term preservation of cultures. This is very, very critical if some sort of long-term entity, company, institute, or something like that is going to be implementing the use of these fungi. Initial identification, okay? What does Bovaria look like? What does Metarhizium look like? I'm assuming that at least some of you don't know, and some of you do. So hopefully we're going to get everybody on the same page, if you will. Further molecular identification, which is necessary, is going to be discussion only because it's beyond right now will be the capability of doing this in Kathmandu in that lab in only 1 week. And this whole course is going to be 1 week, a very intensive week, I should add. Probably good 8 hours a day. I'm a harsh taskmaster as a professor, so be prepared. But the molecular identification, I can give you some tools, identify some methods, all molecular, DNA sequencing. Metarhizium, which used to be known as one species, is now up to 52 different species, which may not be so important biologically, but to the regulators, it can be very important, and you must be able to develop a firm identity. Bovaria bassiana is about to be reorganized into about a dozen species, maybe even 20 species. Next slide, please. Okay, and then evaluation selection for development. It's not all about virulence. Can we have the next slide, please? Commercial development involves it's a puzzle, and it involves many pieces. Virulence is only one of them. Spore production, efficiently, economically, is just as important, as well as shelf life. Just because you can make a lot of fungus, if you can't keep it alive on the shelf, it defeats the purpose, okay? And then there's the sort of what I call ecological context of temperature, water activity or humidity, ultraviolet, depending on the projected use, whether it's on the foliage or in the soil. Those all have factors into choosing what is the best fungus. It's not all virulence. It's a compromise. So, for example, the strain of Bovaria GHA that I helped commercialize in the United States is not the most virulent fungus for many, many insects, but it produces spores tremendously well. It has almost incredible shelf life. I have spores that are now 20 years old and 98% viability. It is tolerant of a lot of ecological situations. So if you can go back one slide, go back one slide. Okay, so we're going to be talking about each one of these components. We're not going to do any hands-on here. This is just to really orient you as to, if you're in the process of what is the best fungus to use in Vietnam against aphids and whiteflies, or what is the best fungus to use in Cambodia or Pakistan. Okay, so this will be more of a lecture. Okay, go ahead. 2 slides, please. 1, 2. Okay, mass production, of course, what everybody's interested. The emphasis is going to be on solid substrate, methods that are appropriate for different technology levels, and also production scales. What substrates? What containers? How do you prepare the substrate and the containers? Tyndallization, perhaps, versus sterilization, which is a little less expensive, less energy consumption. The type of inoculum. There's a little typo in there. Under type of inoculum, one does not need a fancy liquid fermenter, okay? And environmental parameters for good production. And here I wanted to spend a good 2 days with hands-on preparation of substrates, inoculants, the actual fermentation, harvesting, and everything else. So this is going to be the real cooking part of the course. At least 2 days, perhaps even 3 days of very intensive, hopefully well-organized presentations. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, you've produced the fungus. You really have to dry it and harvest it. I'm going to be talking about different methods, showing you some things that you can do, talking about how fast do you dry the fungus for good viability, talking about something called critical water activity or basic moisture. All of these are important contributors to a good quality, efficacious product that the farmers will want to use. Okay, and then quality control. What are the best practices? Direct conidial counts, viability determinations. This is all going to be hands-on, particularly for those of you who don't have experience in this. And I can't emphasize it more, because if you don't have quality, you don't have faith by the farmer in the particular biopesticide. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, formulation. There are many different types of formulations. Some have different specific uses. In the West, we have emulsifiable suspensions are the most common. So these are spores in emulsifiable oils. There are some distinct advantages of doing an emulsifiable oil over a simple aqueous suspension of spores. There are wettable powders. One can make granules. And in all of this, there are shelf life considerations. In America, we have to keep the fungus with minimal viability loss for at least 1 year at room temperature, which is defined around 25 centigrade. Okay, I hope to give you some hands-on training and tips on how to prepare an oil flowable or emulsifiable suspension, a wettable powder, a water dispersible granule, and so on. And by the way, I wanted to mention, so the emphasis is really on the entomopathogenic fungi, Bovaria, Metarhizium, Isaria, but much of this technology can be used for a mycofungicide, particularly trichoderma. In Ecuador, almost every biopesticide, small, medium enterprise, is doing trichoderma to control plant pathogens, as well as Bovaria or Metarhizium. And so many of the things that I will be teaching are also applicable to mass production of a trichoderma. Okay, next slide. Okay, the last thing is just try to talk about some best use practices. You have to remember these myco-insecticides are really contact agents, so you have to bring the spores into contact with the insect in sufficient numbers to cause a significant mortality in that insect population. So there's certain fundamentals in terms of spray equipment, in terms of approaches, and most of this will be discussions and presentations and discussions. I hope to get a good synthesis of ideas from you, what is possible, what is not possible. Again, this is going to be an exchange. And I want to have lastly discussion, not only at the end, but also all through the week, a discussion with you about your own situations, your own needs. So we get a synthesis. Next slide. Okay, because I am not the expert, okay? I am not the Paul Bocuse of French cuisine. I am just one of many chefs, albeit with a lot of experience, that I want to share with you, okay? But I'm not the expert. I don't have the way to do it. So it's going to be a synthesis. I want to learn your ideas, your own experiences, so that we all learn together, teach each other, to help each other in our different countries, and to come up with some good practical implementation of these, particularly the myco-insecticides. Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions?
Hello, Stephen. Hello.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this is Wu from Singapore. As a chemist, actually, I listened to your presentation with a great interest. It's quite new for me.
Yeah.
I just try to understand when we try to introduce this thing is something new to the country. How do we convince the regulators that say no any biosecurity issue we are kind of introduced to the country? How do we convince to the authority, oh, this one is clear by many countries, there's no any biosecurity concern?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that part?
Okay, well, certainly, these fungi have been registered not only in the United States and Canada, but also in the EU, which perhaps the EU is the most rigorous regulatory structure on this planet. And so there's a considerable amount of data that has to be generated about the safety. And there is it has grown a general recognition that the fungi, certainly the viruses, are very, very safe, not only for humans, but also the environment. So there's a track record, if you will. In addition, and it's gone to the point, let's say, for example, the government of Ecuador has dispensed with the normal regulatory structure for the well-known biopesticides. Instead, they are emphasizing quality and purity. So if you want, I'll give you, this is an alternative paradigm, which is functioning, run by the Ministry of Agriculture in Ecuador. If you're a small, medium biopesticide producer, you submit 5 samples to it's called a agrocualidad laboratory, which I helped set up actually as a USDA employee. And with specifications, the lab checks, make sure that there is the good fungus meets specifications by the producer. Also that there's minimal contamination. US EPA allows a 5 log lower level of contaminants. Of course, no salmonella, no E. coli, and so on and so on. The known human pathogens. And if you meet those requirements, the ministry gives you a certificate of quality, and you can go ahead and sell your product. At the same time, the ministry reserves the right to pull products off the marketplace without telling you and check. And if your product still meets your submitted specifications and purity, you're okay. If it's not, they revoke the certificate and you have to begin all over again. It's kind of an interesting, different paradigm. What it has resulted in Ecuador is a very large-scale proliferation of small, medium enterprises, even the larger farms growing their own Bovaria trichoderma metarrhizium to put out on their crops. Obviously, in those cases, there is no regulation because if you grow your own, and so on.
Okay, Stefan, maybe we can move forward on other questions. And just to get back to Dr. Wu, I think your question, Dr. Wu, was actually about importing organisms, whereas this training will be how to isolate organisms within your own country. So it's about native organisms, not about importing organisms.
Yes.
But we
Okay.
do have
So
some
it is,
other
although it
countries.
is,
We do have
it
some
is
other
possible. Yeah,
questions.
one of the sources can be an international repository, such as the ARS Entomopathogenic Fungus Collection in New York.
So we have a question. How about your experience related to Spodoptera?
I have a very good Bovaria for Spodoptera, which the data of which have actually been published by a colleague of mine. Very highly efficacious. So there are certainly the Bovaria that I have, which actually may be commercialized in Australia. We shall see. But anyway, there are strains that are highly infectious and efficacious for Spodoptera. Of course, the main target or the main tool in many places is to use a virus. Now, viruses require in vivo production, which means you need to grow them inside insects. It is possible. It is feasible. There are several products in the United States that are that's just my alarm, that are commercially produced in vivo. Unfortunately, that's a whole separate workshop.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. So I think
I have
we'll.
a question, Michael.
Oh,
I have a question,
yes.
Michael. Yeah. Stefan, thank you
Yes.
so much for a very excellent presentation. And my question is partially preempted by the comments from Michael, which shows that you are going to use the local strains for mass production. So you're not going to import strains which are known to have those efficacy. But my question is, are you going to go at a very basic level for isolation of strains, testing for their bioefficacy, and then are you going to go for the mass production, or
Yes.
you already
Yes.
have some information about that?
Oh, well, yeah, in terms of selection, yes. I'm assuming that a good part of the audience, of you listeners, have very little experience. Those of you who would be involved in this have very little experience in this. Now, I've done this before. I've done this in Ecuador. I've done this in Senegal, a few other places. So it's going to be a very basic how do you find your own? Now, yes, you can import, but there are strains. The diversity of these strains is tremendous, and usually in your own country you can find the efficacious and commercially acceptable strains. You don't have to go and steal a strain out of an American product, for example.
Okay, we have another question by Dr. Swapan from India. How about your experience in controlling sucking pests under field conditions with the mycopesticides?
Yeah, it's very feasible. I have done it. And part of the development of the Bovaria strain GHA, which may be known in your world as Botanigard, Mycotrol, we focused on whitefly nymphs, aphids, and thrips. And we got field efficacy, including, for example, cotton in Arizona, where it is ostensibly very hot. It is ostensibly very dry, but not in the cotton leaf surface. And we got efficacy. You can get good efficacy.
All right. I don't know if she's currently muted. If she is, Sassy, or somebody, can you please unmute Martina? She wanted to make a comment.
Yes, hi. Hi, everybody. This is Martina from Apari. Stefan, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And I'm really glad that you have also raised this need to adapt the different methods to capacity needs and also the need to learn together. And also Dr. Wu was asking the question of how do we convince regulator, but also like how do we convince farmers themselves. So this is just a comment that I have, that this is something that is going to be covered tomorrow. And I really hope that you are going to be participating in tomorrow's webinar, continuation of this meeting, because I'm sure these type of questions will come up again related to the processes of how we transfer the knowledge? How we ensure that we all learn together and document these experiences? So this is just a comment that I have.
Yes.
Thank
Well,
you.
I certainly hope to participate tomorrow, but certainly the farmer has to be educated. And this is what CABI's doing, for example, and the different regional centers, ISIPI, ICARA, and so on and so on. There's a tremendous amount of education. I understand Vietnam has done a considerable amount of farmer education in the use of biopesticides. And this is where the extension component is going to be very important, as well as demonstrated efficacy.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we need to move forward to the next presentation. So we have Thomas Jackal. As we mentioned, part of the overall plan for the project is concerning biopesticide regulatory harmonization. And so, Dr. Jackal, are you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, fine.
If you could speak a little louder, that would be better.
Yeah, okay. So, getting my mic closer. Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, hello everybody. My name is Thomas Jackal. I am currently working actually at the rice department in Bangkok as a rice expert in rice production, but I have been in the area now for almost about 30 years. And I've been mainly working in plant protection and especially for a long time in the commercialization of biopesticides. So actually a topic that we heard just before. I've been here active in the Southeast Asia region. And I have been also involved in the development of regulatory cooperation in ASEAN countries, and that will be the topic of my talk today, and about the upcoming work we have next year on this topic. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview. I just go back quickly, what is the history, of regulatory harmonization in ASEAN? What does that mean? Where does it come from? And then I have a just quick note on what is biopesticides, biocontrol agents, because it's very important to talk about the right definition for the different type of plant protection products, especially when it comes to regulatory issues. I will have then a brief look at the Asian market and also at the global marketplace, because from the regulatory point of view, it's of course very important also to know what is currently on the market, how is the market developing, what kind of organisms, active ingredients, and so on are actually coming on the regulatory desk. So that is, I think, very important. And I will present you some data from, the latest data I have is 2015. So also within this project, we can also look then what has happened actually since 2015. Then I will quickly look at what do we need actually to prepare a workshop about regulatory harmonization, which is scheduled then next year. What do we need to know? So what do we need to assess, and what are the questions we have to ask to prepare that workshop in a proper way? And at the end, I just present a tentative workshop plan that can be then worked out in the time ahead. The next slide, please. So this is, I just want to show here, actually I started in 2006 when I was directing a project on the commercialization of biopesticides in Southeast Asia, where we actually addressed this question that we just talked about in the previous presentation. So how do we get products, microbial products, but we also had semiochemicals, microbials. So how do we get actually these products to the market? Because these products, wherever and in whatever scale they are produced, they're not walking from the bench to the farmer. So it needs usually actually a commercial enterprise or something like that in between, and reaching out to the farmer is also, I think, a very important part of the private sector, who will then distribute and sell these products. So you have to have these products available in the first place, otherwise you cannot use and distribute them. So that is where I started commercialization. And during this project, I got in touch with FAO in 2006, 2007, when we discussed that we should have a closer look at the regulation of biopesticides. And that after some years, then in 2013, I worked together with FAO on the harmonization and regulatory requirements for biopesticides. FAO had a bigger program concerning all synthetic pesticide regulatory management, and I, together with especially the Ministry of Agriculture in Thailand and other partner countries, we looked at the regulatory requirements and potential for harmonization of these product groups. So this ended actually at that time with the publication that I show you here, a publication of FAO on pesticide regulatory management. And the next slide, please. And I then picked up this path in a project together with ASEAN member states, with the ASEAN Secretariat. And actually I was at that time in GIZ working on the one side with the Department of Agriculture in Thailand, and reaching out into the region through the ASEAN Secretariat and the ASEAN Working Group on Crops on a 2 years work to develop guidelines on the regulation, use and trade of biological control agents for the region. And this work was published actually in 2014, the so-called ASEAN Guidelines on Biocontrol Agents. I have here indicated for the participants, those of my colleagues who worked on these guidelines. You will maybe find familiar names. These were all colleagues from the departments of agriculture of the ASEAN member states. We actually worked together with all 10 member states at that time. And this publication is also available. The next slide, please. So what was the goal of these guidelines? Actually, there are two major goals if you look at the regional harmonization effort. First, you want to have a better framework for the implementation of biopesticides, biocontrol agent, that will ultimately facilitate more registration. So you want to support the distribution and better establishment of these products in the region. That was the goal. Another goal is to provide a template for harmonization of regulation and thus stimulate the regional trade and exchange of these very products. So that was actually the second goal. And what was done also within these guidelines was that we also made a definition. What is biocontrol agents, biopesticides, and we actually use a definition that is market-oriented. It's not a science-based definition. It's a market-oriented definition. So what products are actually traded and in the market, and we followed also there the guidance of OECD and the International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association in having 4 products group where we focused on microbial organisms, macroorganisms, semiochemicals, including pheromones, for instance, and natural products that contain, all things like plant extracts, fermentation products, and other products with biochemical molecules. So that was the definition we put forward in this guideline. The next slide, please. We also had in 2015 some laboratory trainings on how to analyze these active ingredients or microorganisms in products, also coupled with the analytical approach to biofertilizers, which took hold in the region. Actually, it was quite popular on starting during that time. So just to show you an example, we had a couple of trainings during that time. Next slide, please. So I just show you that slide. I will not go into detail. It's very important to define what we are talking about. You know that around the world there are different definitions. What are biopesticides? What are biocontrol agents? Again, I already outlined what we have chosen in our ASEAN guidelines on biocontrol agents. There, I show you on the left side here on that slide the definition from China. You will go to another countries and you might find a different definition. Again, also for our workshop that is ahead, it's very important to predefine what kind of products do we want to look at, and how do we want to address the regulatory harmonization question on that. With regard to that expression harmonization, I just would like also to briefly mention that within the ASEAN member state context, the word harmonization is actually not that appropriate. The ASEAN member states at that time, at least, were quite reluctant to use that harmonization word because, ASEAN member states have a mutual non-interference cooperation in internal affairs. So they rather prefer to say maybe regulatory cooperation or something like that. But this is just a side note. Let's keep in the moment with the word harmonization. Next slide, please. It's very important from the regulatory point of view to know what's actually going on in terms of registrations. And I made a market study together with colleagues in 2015, what products are actually registered in Asia as a whole. And you see here, I will not go into detail here. Now, examples here for microbials and for natural products. What was the status of registrations in 2015? So that will be really a necessary prerequisite for our upcoming workshop to look at what's going on in the moment. I assume there will be some changes, but the basic categories of products will be the same. And but it is important to look at that and make a pre-assessment of what's going on now in the moment. I can say that ASEAN as a whole had a quite good number of products registered by their time. Of course, China is a country where we have a lot of product registrations and also a lot of production going on. India, Japan and Korea here as examples. Korea is a country with a very diversified registration portfolio of these products. So there is some products on the market, so there is something available here. The next slide. Here also we don't have to look at the details, the market sizes of these biocontrol markets in Asia. This has certainly changed by now, as I assume, because worldwide, I think the the popularity of this group and the sales actually are going up and the registrations are going up. So this will have changed. But just briefly to say that China is by far the biggest market here worldwide, actually, when it comes to production of biocontrol, biopesticide products. Korea is also very strong in that, and ASEAN as such has actually quite good market potential for the use of these products. Next slide, please. So they just got figures here just recently on the marketplace, and companies worldwide were asked, what are you investing in the moment with regard to plant protection products? And as you see here, biological pesticides is high on the agenda of many companies worldwide. Also, and this is why I come back, we have to talk about definitions. The biostimulants have taken off substantially in the last year, and this is a very important market segment that is expanding and where products will land on the regulatory table for assessment. So these are two groups that will certainly develop further in the future. Next slide, please. And when consumers were asked why do you want these products, and also companies, so the most important answer was that consumers want low residue produce, of course. And this is our workshop about. So this important argument. Then environmental issues are, of course, very important, that companies and consumers are looking more and more to biocontrol, biopesticides. And then there are legal restrictions. Certain bans, for instance, have a great influence of the market of biopesticides. So just a quick look. So what's happening now in the moment in terms of these products. Next slide, please. So what do we need to know before the workshop in July 2021? The first thing is, of course, what are the expectations and aspirations of the participating countries with regard to regulatory harmonization? And as you have here within this workshop already, you get experience and you get hands-on technology. So I think it will be good to discuss before the workshop what do you expect from the outcome. And equally important is to discuss then what is the current regulatory and legal situation in the participating countries regarding biopesticides and biocontrol agents. So we would have a pre-workshop survey. We would determine the country-specific situation. We would, for instance, look at ASEAN member states and looking, what is the progress and the obstacles since 2015, because we worked together until 2015 on these things. So it will be certainly interesting to know how is the progress, what changed, what did not change, and where are the obstacles. So that is certainly something we have to assess before the workshop. And we have to look into the status and capacity of the governmental regulatory system, of course, which we did at that time already. And we have to look at it again, looking, where is progress, where are obstacles, and so on and so forth. The other interesting question will be, are there any major legislative frameworks? How has the regulatory landscape changed? Are there now, because when I finished that harmonization work in 2015, a great part of the participating country had, in one way or another, included regulatory change into their systems. And the question is now also, did that continue? Has that been expanded? And that is certainly interesting to look at. Are there other major legislative framework, like, what is the IPM situation? In Europe, we have a Sustainable Use Directive. Are there any zoning activities, Organic Act? Yeah, these are all keywords we have experienced here also in the region. So that is something we have to look at. And of course, last but not least, the definition. So what products do we want to talk about? Next, please. Yeah, that is actually a little bit a reiteration of what I said before. So looking at the number of registration, what products, how many registrations, and then a very neuralgic point in the region is quality, and that was already addressed in the previous talk. Quality is everything for biopesticides, biocontrol agents, and quality, keeping up quality during the production is one thing, but keeping the quality during the lifetime of the commercial product is another story, and how to actually monitor compliance to the regulatory requirements. That is another story, and I know all of the regulatory systems here, at least in ASEAN countries, and it's everywhere. This is a weak point. So the post-registration monitoring of compliance of product quality is a major issue, and there have been major upsets on that, because there were, for instance, adulterated products in the market, fake products from major sources. I will not name now countries or companies, but there have been really problems that have actually tainted the image of these products. So this is, I think, a very important point we have to discuss about. Next slide, please. So here, just the two last slides on a tentative workshop program. So I have allocated in the moment 3 days. In the first day, we would, of course, discuss about the goal and expected outputs of this workshop. The definition, I just mentioned that already. We have to talk about what do we want to harmonize, and where do we see, which product groups do we see potential for harmonization or cooperation on regulation. We would discuss then the results of the pre-workshop assessment in the first day. So looking what is the current status of each country regulatory system, what products are registered, what products are not registered, although they are maybe available in the market. So that is a very important question also. So identifying gaps and ways for improvement, that would be then the first day. The second day would be then, if we look into more detail, so how and where can we improve? So what are the approaches to risk assessment of this product group in the region and in the participating countries? What are the approaches of efficacy testing? I know that you have a group working on the efficacy also. So this can be discussed. Then how do we handle the post-registration period? That is actually for me very important to convey. This will be a very important point, because this is weak here in Asia. And other topics, for instance, like how do the regulatory institutions work together with the companies who want to register products? This is still also a very, let's say, challenging area that is not very well worked out. And the pre-registration consultations, for instance, that is a very important part that can help to better or to make these product group more easy to register, because it needs a regulatory crosstalk between the applicant and the regulatory authority. Next slide. So, and then at the third day, we could really come to a conclusion how we could address regulatory harmonization or cooperation within ASEAN member states or beyond, or within the partner countries that are here in this workshop. And so what are the potential avenues for that, for collaboration? What does trade facilitation mean in practice? I mean also in practice with regard to this product group, so trade in biocontrol agents. It was already addressed before. We have, of course, biocontrol agents that can be produced locally and biocontrol agents that can be imported. So, and how do we generally facilitate better trade of both groups within the region? Yeah. And then the other questions pertain to potential sharing of analytical laboratory resources. This is also a strong topic here in this workshop. So I think we will find a lot of points we need to discuss, and that will be actually the task of the pre-workshop period to put this all together and then have a comprehensive 3-day meeting where we discuss all these issues. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Thomas. Also, it's an excellent review of the activities that have been undertaken within ASEAN. So just to be clear to everybody in this group, what we're trying to achieve also in this project is to build upon the experiences that have already occurred, that have been described within ASEAN, and expand that cooperation to other parts of South Asia, which are part of this project, which have even, I would say, in general, lesser developed biopesticide regulatory systems. So that's one of the goals of this project. And I see there's some questions online here. Let's see, there was a question. Let's see, so Catalina had a question, said, is the current status of country regulatory systems on biopesticide going to be self-assessment from each country, or is the project going to provide a lawyer which could assist countries with this task? Well, I think initially it's going to be a self-assessment. It's going to be training for those countries. It's going to be training for those that do not necessarily have a current system. And really it's up to their internal political infrastructures on how to develop this legislation. So, for example, in Pakistan, we recently came into a situation like this where there was not a specific regulatory system, and I have helped them prepare some guidelines for their potential adoption to develop a biopesticide regulatory system, and that is currently under review.
Well, Michael, just a comment on that also. Actually, this we will assess during the pre-workshop survey. We will, as here in these workshops are certainly also some people from the departments of agriculture. I think they can assess their country status relatively easily. I have seen no country who has really no regulatory system. Most of the regulatory systems are, of course, designed for synthetic pesticides. And the question is, to what extent would the biopesticides could be covered by this system, or where where are the discrepancies? That is a major issue we can I think we can find out. But if I look at all these countries, they have more or less a kind of regulatory system. The one may be more developed, the other lesser developed, but there are certainly guidelines. And you also have to see that I think many of these countries here in the workshop are part of the Asia Pacific Plant Protection Commission, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so FAO has already a mechanism in place to discuss these things. Although I'm not up to date in the moment how active FAO and the Asia Pacific Plant Protection Commission is on including biocontrol, biopesticides products.
Okay, so Catalina, I don't know if you're still on the line. Perhaps did you want to express a question or comment directly? If we can unmute Catalina's line.
Hi, Michael. Yeah, I'm here. But the thing is that there's a lot of noise here, so it stopped right now, but it started again. So just what I will.
Yeah, so your voice is kind of a little difficult to hear clearly. But please try to go ahead. Catalina? Okay, so Catalina is indicating that she's having some problems with her microphone. So I see Ravi wanted to make some comments. So Ravi?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Well,
Yes.
Thomas Jekyll, I must congratulate you for an excellent presentation and a very good overview of where we are and where we should be moving. I have few comments. What I think can be further covered in your whole strategy of organizing the workshop next year, July. First, I think this workshop requires participation of policymakers. Our project partners are very good. They are highly technical. They are nice. But we need a combination of people who have to be there, because otherwise there are many layers of getting things approved in Asian countries because of bureaucracy and whatever. So at that platform, we do need policymakers to be directly, physically involved, which is, I believe, very crucial. Number two, what I can say on something which is going on quite indiscreetly, in a discreet manner in Asia is most of the conventional chemicals company, the multinationals, are not happy with the sudden push in the biopesticide and the biopesticide manufacturing. And these companies are, rich companies. They are somehow, by some means, able to influence the government to go slow on biopesticide registration mechanism and all what you mentioned about the quality compliance and all. So those issues somehow, I think we need to see how we cover that. But in your survey and in the workshop, I believe we need to be very, very clear on like conventional chemicals vis-a-vis biopesticide. Those things we need to check or cover from the angle of convincing the regulators. And the point of Asia Pacific Plant Protection Commission, you were right. They were very active when we had this guy Piao Yongfang as a secretary. And for 1 year, there was no one as a regular secretary. Only recently, one guy has joined, Dr. Yubak Dhoj. We had a good discussion with him, Michael and me, with the whole FAO team. He had just joined by that time. I think they are very keen to carry it forward. And what I mentioned in the morning in my presentation is that is where I think the FAO can play a very, very important role on this policy and regulatory affairs. And coming back to the question of Catalina, like how these guidelines can become national regulations. This is a very challenging job and a very good question, in fact. But what I think we all know it this requires a political will. So here we have to take, especially for South Asia, Southeast Asia, ASEAN is doing a lot, but South Asia we need to rope in SARC, the South Asian, the SARC Agriculture Committee of the South Asian Association of Research and Cooperation. That we need to rope in to have an umbrella organization to really champion this cause of national regulation, because many countries in South Asia, even now, do not have biopesticide registration mechanism also. So these were my few points, but I really liked your presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Ravi. Sasi, can you please unmute the mic for Vasant Patel so he can make his presentation and load it, please?
Sure. Yeah, I will.
Vasant, are you unmuted now, or?
Yeah. Hello.
Very good.
Yeah,
Hello.
Michael.
Yes,
can you
they
hear?
are loading your They are loading your presentation.
Yeah. You can hear me clearly, Michael?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. First of all, on behalf of CropLife Asia, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to Michael and his team who has organized this special initiative for the Asia pesticide residue mitigation through the promotion of biopesticides and enhancing trade opportunities. And on this occasion, Michael requested us that if we could brief us the ASEAN Pesticide Management Harmonization Initiative, which we have started a couple of years back. So just to give a background on this project. Of course, this project was focused, it had focus on both pesticides and non-chemical pesticides like biopesticides. But this implementation part by CropLife Asia, which was started, is focused on chemical pesticide regulation. Just to give a background. Can I have the next slide, please? And this is the background of this ASEAN Pesticide Management Harmonization Project. At the outset, I want to make it clear, though the CropLife Asia is working with the ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN member states in capacity building to implement this project, but this whole project is based on the FAO project from 2009 to 2012. From 2009 to 2011, for 18 months, Dr. Pio from FAO was the lead, project lead for this project. And of course, besides the ASEAN member states, 10 ASEAN member states were invited, 7 participated in this project. And CropLife Asia was also invited for this project right from the beginning. This project ran for 18 months from 2009 to 2011. And of course, the report was published by FAO in 2012. And this is available on website. It is titled as Assisting Countries in Southeast Asia Towards Achieving Pesticide Regulatory Harmonization. As in line with any FAO project, this was, of course, based on the involvement of key stakeholders from the ASEAN member states. And this guidance document has been published by FAO which runs in almost very close to 450 to 500 pages. It covers both chemical pesticides as well as biopesticides. But in this, my presentation, I'm going to focus on the implementation part of pesticide management harmonization. So after 2012, really nothing happened. And I had a couple of follow-up meetings with Dr. Pio at that time. And he was also equally very frustrated that nothing is happening in terms of putting those recommendations into practice in member states. So keeping that situation in mind, he said if CropLab Asia could do something, it would be good. So we initiated the action plan in consultation with, of course, the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta, and really touched the base that what we could do to take this project in terms of putting in practice some of these very clear recommendations that came out of this FAO project. So to start with, we took up this project first in 2016 to the 20th meeting of ASEAN Expert Working Group on MRLs. This is a group of the ASEAN who meets annually every year in January, where they talk about the pesticide residue programs, including the data generated to decide the MRLs based on the Codex guidelines, and of course they decide the work plan for next year. And we are proud to say that we have been associated with ASEAN EWG MRL group since 2002, continuously, with probably exception of 1 year gap. So we are closely working with this ASEAN Expert Working Group on MRLs, primarily focus on establishing MRLs as per the Codex guidelines, and also help in capacity building based on the specific requirements coming out from ASEAN EWG MRL group. So when we took this pesticide management harmonization initiative with the EWG, of course they were very glad to support this project. But since this project really covered the topics beyond pesticide residues very exhaustively, with more on regulatory aspects of product chemistry, toxicology, which involves the human and environmental health and safety, as well as the bioefficacy part and residue part, labeling, packaging, including the what we call the good quality data following the GLP practices and mutual acceptance of data. They suggested that probably EWG MRL is not the right body to endorse this as a capacity from ASEAN. And they were very good enough to suggest that we take up this project to the in the ASEAN. They have the planning group for the agriculture called ASEAN Sectorial Working Group on Crops. So we put up the very detailed proposal to the ASEAN Sectorial Working Group on Crops, ASWGC, in July 2017 in Malaysian meeting. And of course, when a project was submitted earlier, there were a lot of questions. We went back with the full questions and answers to the questions posed by the ASWGC. And after almost about 1 year, we got endorsement in July 2017 from ASWGC. And they recommended it that senior ministers of agriculture in ASEAN should endorse this project, and finally this project was endorsed in July 2017, where ASWGC clearly asked CropLab Asia to help in implementing this project with the involvement of regulators from 10 member states. And here we really involved the key regulators coming from each country to implement this project. And basically the project kickoff started from March 2018 with the first phase on the product chemistry. And now the next slide, please. And this is the history, how we took up from the ASEAN Expert Working Group through the ASWGC, starting from 2016, and how the approval was obtained from 38 Senior Ministers of Agriculture AMF meeting held in Singapore in August 2017. And then the implementation was started from March 2018. That's a detailed background, how the project ran through the approval from the ASEAN, the structure based in Jakarta. The next slide, please. To give a bird's eye view, this project implementation was really broken down in the 6 phases. You can see here, I am not going to read it. Out of the 6 phases, we are glad to report here that we have completed 4 phases. The 4th phase was on pesticide residues data, MRLs, which was completed in November 11 to 15, 2019, last year in Hanoi, Vietnam, where the Plant Protection Department was the major host. So we have, with that implementation out of 6 phases, 4 have been completed. The 5th phase on, of course, the bioefficacy and biology data, protocol harmonization, and mutual acceptance of bioefficacy data within ASEAN member state was really planned in this year, sometimes in June, July. But due to this very, what you call the viral epidemic around the world, it's not possible to have a face-to-face meeting on the regulators in ASEAN. So this meeting of 2020, which was planned, as of now stands postponed. And if the situation on the ground for this COVID-19 improves, our expectation is that we are looking at March, April 2021 for this 5th phase to be implemented with 1-week training program. Typically, all these phases, we have 5 full working days program, Monday to Friday, where we have about 25 to 26 regulators coming from 10 member states sitting for whole week and running through the technical aspects of data requirement, which needs to be harmonized. And this harmonization of technical data requirement does not need any national legal changes. What we are basically focusing on harmonizing the technical guidelines, data requirement in support of pesticide registration. I also want to emphasize here in all the 4 phases, our main experts, lead experts were coming from third parties. And I could say, for example, in a product chemistry phase, we had the chairman of FAO WHO committee on product specification from Switzerland, very well-known chemist. Then for phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4, we had JMPR experts from FAO WHO committees coming on different topics. And of course, they were assisted by our experts from CropLife member companies. So basically, our primary focus has been to take the recommendations of that FAO report and help the countries in building up the capacity, how this guidance document can be utilized in developing registration data requirement for the countries. So with this delay of viral epidemic, of course, this project now will be delayed by almost a year. And our last phase will focus on the good quality data, because today the global standard for good quality data, of course, we spoke about in earlier presentation of the GLP data for the chemistry part, residue part, and that also applies for toxicology part, environmental fate, and all other physicochemical data generation. And all around the world, we advocate that regulators must rely for evaluation of the pesticide safety on a good quality data. And of course, the data particularly generated on the new innovations are protected by the patents as well as data protection. And this is as per the the international property, intellectual property rights provisions, which is the part of WTO obligation for most of the countries have signed that. So that session will be the last session So we will complete the 6 phases with that as a part of this program. Can I have the next slide, please? These are just, I have to share what are the expected benefits of this pesticide management harmonization across ASEAN. The focus on science-based risk assessment approach, evidence-based evaluation and approval of the products, as well as have the uniform labeling guidelines across the ASEAN in terms of for communication with these farmers who are using the products, as well as for the helping the trade. And as you can see here on the left side in the green bar block there, you can see depending on the countries in ASEAN, the time lag could be a big difference. If, for example, Australia approves the new innovations in less than 2 years, whereas in some of the countries in ASEAN can take up to almost 5.5 to 6 years. And that's, we believe that this really denies the access to the new and better technology to the growers, and with the harmonization probably some of these obstacles could be removed, so the growers do get access to the newer and better innovations. Can I have the next slide, please? And of course, one of the aim of this harmonization project that countries can share the work, share the expert interpretation from one country to the other country. So that will expected to minimize the workload of the regulators in the 10 member states. And that will also hasten the approval of the new technology because of the evaluation by the few member states as the lead countries. That is expected, as this is happening today in North America with the NAFTA, what you call the joint evaluation. So it's more or less similar principles we are expecting that ASEAN countries will adopt by following the mutual acceptance of data. And this can encourage the local R&D investment in the ASEAN countries. And not only that, as said earlier, it will also help in mitigating the trade barriers, particularly from the movement of the agriculture commodities, not only within the ASEAN but the outside ASEAN, by harmonizing even pesticide MRLs, which are used for the many crops. The next slide, please. And as you can see here, this harmonization will support the trade within ASEAN and outside ASEAN, and it will also help in compliance with global best practices based on the science and evidence-based data, and adopting codex and ASEAN MRLs into national standards, and formalizing the mechanism to help acceptance of export crop commodities by importing countries. Can I have the next slide, please? This is just a snapshot of our November meeting we had in November, week of 11 to 15 for the pesticide residues. And you can see here Dr. Yamada from JMPR member for FAO/WHO for more than 20 plus years, and advisor to Japanese Ministry of Agriculture on food safety. He was the principal lead expert to run this program. And this is a snapshot of the regulators across ASEAN. Can I have the next slide, please? Our last phase 4 on MRLs basically was directed to ensure the food safety through the quality and consistency of information, facilitate the regional trade and global trade through harmonized MRLs, and of course expedite the MRL establishment by harmonizing residue data requirements and transportability or acceptance of residue data within ASEAN. And you can see here we had 26 regulators. Deputy Director General of PPD Vietnam was the chief guest for opening this and closing this session. And Dr. Yamada Yakiko from Japan Ministry of Agriculture and a member of JMPR was the lead expert for this session. Can I have the next slide, please? Now moving on to the main topic of today's discussion, the phase 5 on harmonizing the bioefficacy testing protocols and mutual acceptance of data. Of course, what we already have a draft blueprint of a program tentatively defined, which will cover the key crops and key pests. And when we say pest, means it will cover the important insect pests, important diseases, as well as the important weeds. So 3 segments under the crop protection. And our idea is to cover the key crops like rice, vegetables, and some of the important fruits like mango, banana, and also the oil palm, which is a major crop for ASEAN countries. And since this will cover both insects, diseases, as well as the weeds part, the program runs almost basically for 5 days, out of which 4.5 days will be like a workshop with the experts coming from, again, as far as the bioefficacy is concerned, our major emphasis will be to have the experts from the leading universities, research institutions across ASEAN, both from countries as well as the international research institutes like World Vegetable Center for vegetable crops. We'll also potentially exploring for International Rice Research Institute, besides looking at regional universities. That is the plan. And the proposal is for 1 full week workshop, and Indonesia has agreed to host this meeting. And as I said earlier, we are now looking at timeline of tentatively in March, April 2021, most likely in Bogor or Bandung, depending on, because one of the requirement of this program, we are planning to have a half-day field visit. So that is the plan, with the key assumption, of course, by that time, hopefully, this viral pandemic will probably, the risk will be minimized, and the regulators across ASEAN will be permitted for a face-to-face meeting. That is the major assumption we are having for this workshop. Yeah, the next slide, please. What we are aiming here, what we are trying to harmonize, the field testing protocols for bioefficacy, crop safety, and compatibility. We are talking about the compatibility in the field situation. Earlier, Dr. Nan and his team covered the chemical compatibility, but here, for registration purpose, the compatibility in the field is very, very important, so that will be covered. And I would just want to emphasize here this FAO 2012 report. In fact, almost 1/3 of that report covers the suggested harmonization of protocols for some of the crops and pests. Of course, it doesn't cover everything. So we will follow the similar principle with the lead expert, that they come out with the protocol which ASEAN member state will discuss and agree that they should be followed for testing the products within the 10 member states of ASEAN. And of course, that will ensure mutual acceptance of bioefficacy data within the ASEAN member state who have similar agroclimatic conditions as well as similar agricultural practices. So the key benefit of this, what is major expectation, is work sharing within the ASEAN member states. And of course, that is expected to ensure faster access to the latest technology and innovation for the growers, particularly within the 10 ASEAN member states. As I said in earlier slide today, many of the ASEAN countries and also some of the Asian countries, farmers are probably lagging behind by anywhere from around 10 years in terms of new innovation because of these regulatory hurdles, which can be easily updated with the best practices around the world. So that is the basic aim of this phase 5 on bioefficacy harmonization. The next slide, please. I think that's the summary. slide, in a conclusion, this ASEAN pesticide management harmonization, it is expected to enhance the efficiency of regulatory divisions by work sharing, data sharing, and expertise sharing. And of course, probably for your benefit, as you earlier heard from also the Dr. Jekyll, biopesticide also has been, at least the requirements have been harmonized, but I will not be able to comment whether they are adopted. But as a part of ASEAN economy goal, ASEAN economic community goal, many sectors among the 11 sectors have been already harmonized. And what we are trying that we are taking the recommendations of FAO 2012 report and try to encourage the ASEAN member state regulators to harmonize the common technical data requirement for in terms of pesticide registration. And of course, that is expected to improve the innovation of new technology for the ASEAN farmers, which will expected to improve their productivity as well as will help in the international trade and growth. Of course, as you know, harmonization is the probably word very widely abused, I would say. It needs a multi-stakeholder approach, willingness of the stakeholders to really be more transparent, take up the science-based approach to help them, and so that the countries can move faster in terms of the chemical pesticide evaluation. That will help both the countries as well as the farmers to bring in the better and new innovation to the fields as soon as possible. So that's the conclusion. If there are any questions or comments, I'll try to answer from the comment. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. So I also wanted to recognize CropLife for their contributions, first of all, to the very first STDF project, and then more recently to this biopesticide residue mitigation project. They have also been actively involved in that they donated the use of their headquartered facilities during our project planning phase. So we greatly appreciate that contribution. In addition, Vasant and I have also had communications for adding the non-ASEAN participants to this bioefficacy training workshops that they are having. So that is going to move forward. In addition, linked to this particular presentation, tomorrow we are going to have a presentation by Dr. Alan Norden, who used to work for the Australian Regulatory Authority. And he's also going to be talking about a guidance document on the exchange and use of international efficacy and crop safety data for minor uses. So we're open now for questions.
Yeah, Michael, if you permit me, I have just two quick comments. First,
yes.
I would like to acknowledge in my first slide, I also had the logo of USDA. So on behalf of CropLife Asia, we would like to acknowledge very strong help and support from USDA. Initially, this project was started with CropLife Asia funding, but after 1 year, after discussion with USDA was very nice enough to come back and help us with the funding part. So we got almost up to 50% of the funding support from USDA. So we really acknowledge the very strong support from USDA FAS, and particularly mention the Jason Sandel was very helpful in moving this idea forward, of course, along with the Michael Braverman from IR4. And the other comment, Michael, I have in relation to earlier comment made by I think one of the participants here. I have been working with this industry before joining CropLife for almost 32 years in the industry across Asia Pacific, from India, China, ASEAN. And looking at today's industry, it is very naive to say that industries are blocking biopesticide regulation in the countries. I think this thinking needs to be changed. No country today can be bulldozed by any company. I think one should be very clear. And today I want to say that many countries across Asia Pacific, in fact, have biopesticide regulation in place, which are more simplified as compared to chemical pesticides. And in fact, CropLife Asia members today, some of them are also investing in R&D for biopesticide development. So I just want to put the facts on the table so the people have clarity and no disinformation or misinformation. Then other thing, the problem with the biopesticide in Asia today, a lot of biopesticides are sold across the Asia, whether you talk ASEAN, whether you talk India or China or South Asia. Many of these biopesticides are laced with synthetic chemicals to get a quick knockdown. And it is bringing very bad name the field of pesticides as well as biopesticides. And this problem was only detected when some of the growers exported their products outside their country. These exports were rejected because though the label says they were treated with biopesticides, the exports were laced with the chemicals which are not permitted. So there are a lot of unethical trade. And today, just want to share with this audience here, the illegal trade or counterfeit products is a big menace the field of pesticides, science of pesticides. And today, if that is the area, if the countries and scientists can help with the countries, that how do we catch this black sheep? So not to bring the bad name to the field of pesticides or the science of pesticides. That is my closing comment, Michael, before I take further questions.
Yes, Vasant, I fully agree with your comments. In fact, if anything, the trend worldwide in a lot of the larger manufacturers is that they have taken on large efforts now in biopesticides, and there's a lot of growth in a lot of the larger companies in biopesticide the product development. So it's not a situation where any certain members are for or against, because they're all involved in this area of industry themselves. But all that said, we would like now to open the floor for questions, either for Vasant or any of the previous presentations. Are there any questions? If not, I guess we're kind of at a phase where we're at the wrap up and kind of discussion of the way forward. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of the folks that made a presentation for your time, your effort, and the high quality of your presentations, both in the information that you presented and the way in which you presented them. Also like to thank Catalina and Ray for joining us in opening welcoming remarks. A few other housekeeping things. If you somehow did not receive copies of the presentations, please send me an email and we will forward those to you. I think some of the comments, or some of the final comments I heard was it's really important for some of these activities to go forward and to have meaning that we get the right players involved. Beyond just the agricultural sector. So then to kind of summarize what our future is, we are, with the blessing of COVID-19, whenever that is, we do plan to move forward with the one-on-one training, both in the field and the lab. We will be introducing quality to the work in the sense of good laboratory practice training. We will have specific workshops on mycopesticide production and also regulatory harmonization. And I also want to remind everybody that we will have the next segment of this workshop tomorrow. It will be at 5 a.m. U.S. time, 4 p.m. Bangkok time. I hope you have already received an invitation for that. With that, I will cede the floor to Ravi for any comments on wrap-up and the way forward that he would like to make.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for giving a very crisp wrap-up comments. And I echo what you say about the presentations. And what I would like to highlight is some of the presentations where we have mentioned that by early next year we may have workshops, face-to-face and all. We should remain optimistic, but the FAO, we have some program with FAO. We have been told that till March next year, nothing has to be kept face-to-face. With their speculation and risk assessment, it has to be much after March. So in the early quarter of next year, probably face-to-face may not be feasible, but we'll review the situation as time comes. Secondly, I would like to say that those partners who are involved, those beneficiaries, countries which are involved in the project, I will request them to please ask questions. Please clarify all your doubts, because this is a platform where we can really talk, if not face-to-face, screen to screen, you know. We can see each other in a dynamic form and we can talk, and with an eye contact, it is very important. And the partners in the project, I will also request them to see what synergies are there with their work in this project with their other national ongoing projects. I know in Asian countries, many times, like one lab or one institution is a partner in a project, and there are many more other institutions working in a similar or related field, but there is no cross-talking, no cross-learning. There's a lack of communication. So please bring on the table the synergies you have with your national project. We would like to keep them informed as a regular progress we make in the project, and maybe if we get some good points from what they are doing. So this is one point which I believe is very important. And as Michael said, tomorrow we have a bit of a different kind of a workshop. Apart from one technical presentation by Alan, we have things which actually makes you happy or unhappy. Because technically, you can be very sound, you can be very sharp, you can be very intelligent, which is required, but are you able to do it? Are you able to be on the ground? What is your functional capacity? What are your issues with the policymakers? How are you tackling it? And even for working for this project, what are the admin issues with you? Are you really able to work with APARI and IR4 or USDA with a proper MOU? Or do you need a partnership agreement? There are a lot of tidbits, which will really, which can be pinpricks in your routine working if we don't resolve. So those parts we are going to discuss tomorrow. We will have a long session on functional capacity, blending with technical capacity and importance. It will be an interactive session. And also you will be seeing very clearly how we are going to monitor and evaluate our working gradually as we move forward, so that we have a comprehensive output of such a nice technical thing which has been foreseen in the project. So I will also like to thank all of you, and especially Catalina, for really sparing her time and being there for all patiently for 3 to 4 hours. And then to USDA, IR4, all the project partners, to CropLife Asia, to all the very important experts, though one of them, I think it was Stephen, who said he is not the expert, but I believe he is the expert, and only the expert people say I am not the expert. So we had very good presentation, and there were good interactions, but please ask more questions, especially the beneficiary countries. Please keep us like on our toes so that we can really move the project forward with your support. And with these words, I would like to thank all my APARI colleagues who have been supporting Michael to really make sure that Michael doesn't get tense so much with the IT and with the technical and with the presentation. And so to give him some lease of life also in the last 3 hours. I thank my colleagues. I thank each and every participant who were there. Thank you. And we close the workshop here, I believe, Michael.
Yes, I want to echo your thanks to the APARI team, Tel, Sasi, Taratip, for all your assistance. These 3 ladies have been working very hard in the background, and they deserve a lot of credit for the success of this webinar.
Yeah, and probably there has to be a photo session. We need to have a photo of the screen with the videos on, I believe. Over to Sasi Rekha, she has something to announce for that.
Yeah, so I request all the speakers and the participants to turn on their video, and we would quickly capture the screenshot.
We can smile now. 3 hours we were like serious.
Relieved.
Relieved. Very right. Yes, I see the expert Stephen video on.
Yeah, so all of you been quietly hiding back there and tentatively listening. So thank you for your time and attentiveness. What a group. Great group.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I see Sabian, you've got a group picture of your own there with our new Pakistan.
The whole Kabi Islamabad is there. There are 4 people.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Thank
Please
you very
turn
much.
your videos on so we can get a nice group picture.
I would also request Sel and Nui to turn on their
Sel,
video.
Nui, 3.
There's one empty table also, Sar Chitra. Very interesting. She's there.
So
Yes.
we'll wait for a few more seconds, and then we'll try to capture everyone who are on.
Oh, I see Dennis very much there.
Yes. So Dennis, this next one will be, this next version of this will be in South Africa, right?
Exactly.
Yes, that's why I was listening very intently, because I want to follow in your footsteps.
Yeah. So that's, for those of you who not aware, we've had 2, I mentioned we have 2 people on the line here. One of them being Dennis, who you see in your upper right-hand corner, and the other, Adriana Castaneda, from Colombia. Those are two of the other parts of the world where we are trying to move forward on this project. So ASEAN and Asia as a whole is again in the lead, but Africa is close behind, as well as Latin America.
I see a big team from Bangladesh. Subrata is here, Karima is there, we have Ehsanullah, we have a big team from there. It's very good. Michael, your visits were very useful to all the countries.
Yes, most certainly. Those of you on the bottom, please turn your camera on. Lee from Indonesia, turn your camera on. Everybody wants to see you.
Okay, hi. I cannot do that.
Oh.
Camera is in use by other people.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you very much. Maybe now we have the group.
So I'll just.
Who is clicking? Sasina,
everybody cheese.
I'm taking as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've captured a few pictures. Yeah. So thank you all for the cooperation. I appreciate you all for turning on your videos.
Yes, thank you for everybody for your good work.
Bye.
Thank you, and see you tomorrow, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Many thanks to everybody.
And thanks to Michael also for all his patience.
Thank you, Ravi. Great meeting.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Everybody have a good day or good evening. Thank you very much. So Sassy, you can relax until tomorrow.
Yeah. See you tomorrow, Michael.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
I think I'll sign off.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. See you.
Bye-bye.